this was one of my most received and most commented videos in Tamil about Brexit. Gave a very simple explanation for people who were not aware of what Brexit was, or probably wasn't clear what Brexit was. Gave a bit of history. So people were asking me to make this video in English, and also based on the recent results, why was Conservative Party voted back to power? So we'll discuss a few of these things in today's video. So first of all, what is European Union? I mean, what is Brexit? So Brexit is Britain's exit from European Union. That's what is the short form of, or that's what is shortly called as Brexit. So when Britain is coming out of European Union, what is European Union? So literally after the Second World War in the 1940s, the major European countries wanted to form an alliance so that this doesn't happen, like the war doesn't happen again, and they wanted to make sure that trade and commerce between the countries help them stay together and no future wars break out between the European countries. So in about 1993 was the first time European Union was officially kicked off, even though it was 30-40 years in the making. Officially started with a small group of countries, and today there are about 28 European countries are part of the European Union. Only a very few countries of Europe are not part of the European Union. So what does European Union enable you to do? So it enables you to have free cross-border movement. There is no immigration, there is no customs check, there is no trade restrictions, there is no customs duty, there is no excise duty. So basically, people from these countries, they can go and work and live across these 28 countries freely, like in India. Basically, you can go from one state to another state, live, work. You don't need to pay any additional taxes. You don't need to pay any additional amount of money to go and live in another state inside India. So similarly, within European Union, people can actually freely move and work, live anywhere they want. They can purchase any property that they want. Businesses can actually trade commodities and exchange commodities, and there are no restrictions for the cross-border transactions as well. So it's in a way it makes them a single country or a single territory for all of these activities combined. Additional benefits, like there is a European Court of Justice, there is a European law which many of the countries adopt to, or they have to follow certain laws. Then there is the currency. The European Union tried to create a common currency called the euro, which about 19 countries today have abolished their own currencies that they were following, and now have a common currency in Europe. Many of the countries, 19 countries in Europe. But still there are about 9 or 10 countries within the European Union that have not adopted to the euro currency. For example, Britain is still following pounds, and Switzerland is still following the Swiss francs. So it's not mandated when a new policy or a new program is brought in. It is not mandated for every country to follow it. Countries have the option of opting out if they don't really want to follow that. Union was created with such a good intention, and if it enables so many things, why would people, or why would Britain want to leave the European Union? Simply put, in my perception, based on all the news articles that I've read and all the information that I have got, it is a political reason. So like how in India states are divided or converted into 2 or 3 different states, even though you can give n number of reasoning behind it, the ultimate agenda behind it is politics. So similarly, Brexit, or Britain's exit from European Union, was always on the agenda, and it was being touted as an independence movement. Britain has never had an independence from another country because they were never colonized. So Britain didn't have the concept of independence. So actually a party was created called UK Independence Party, UKIP. And the only thing that they could get independence from was from European Union. As a political agenda, you find reasons why you want to exit from a particular organization, or why you want to actually separate. So one of the biggest reasons that they were able to find was the fees that every country needs to pay into European Union. So the fees that the country needs to pay comes from a different variety of factors depending upon the country's GDP, depending upon the country's size, and so on. So UK's fees to the European Union was a yearly fees of 19 billion pounds. Now this was the biggest propaganda during the campaign, when the political parties who were supporting Britain's exit, who were supporting Brexit, they were basically saying that, we are paying 19 billion pounds per year, roughly translates to about 350 million pounds per week, which is kind of around 3,500 crores in Indian rupees today. That's what we were paying, that's what Britain was paying to European Union every week. This was the biggest propaganda. In reality, after Brexit happened, even the biggest parties which were doing this propaganda accepted that this was a false campaigning, because in reality, Britain wasn't paying 19 billion pounds. There was a 4 or 5 billion standing rebate from the time Britain had become a member. So Britain was paying only about 14 billion pounds, of which European Union spends about 6 to 7 billion pounds back in UK for the small businesses. It gives interest-free loans to the small businesses. Thousands and thousands of small businesses, shops, hotels, restaurants have been opened by entrepreneurs in UK because of these funds from EU which they had given. Also, they were also investing in infrastructure, in roads, in services within UK. European Union was actually spending the money back into UK. So it wasn't as if all of these 14 billion pounds, not even 19 billion, even this 14 billion pounds wasn't as if all of it was being just given as fees and nothing ever came back. More than half that money actually came back to UK, and UK was eventually spending less than a fraction of what was being campaigned by the Leave campaigners. On 16 June, UK voted for the referendum. So the point about bringing the referendum itself was an election assurance. So David Cameron had to bring the referendum, because it became a moot point where they needed to bring the referendum, and that became one of the election promises of Conservatives. So they pretty much every party wanted to bring the referendum because this was kind of gathering momentum. So they brought the referendum during that point of time, and eventually Brexit won by 2%. So the people who voted for Brexit were 51%, people who voted for Remain was 49%. But more than 30% of the people did not even vote. Now, the statistics are very interesting, because if you look at the age factor of the people who actually voted, people below 35, more than 70% of them voted to Remain. But the older people, they were convinced by these propagandas, and they were emotionally motivated that they actually all voted for Leave, because they had nothing to lose. But the people who are working in UK or actually studying in UK less than 25 years age, most of them voted to Remain. Voted based on a what if vote. It was before the referendum results came in. Everybody thought that this was never going to happen. Britain was always going to remain. So it was almost taken for granted that UK will never leave the European Union. That result will not come. So people actually wanted to see how much percentage the leave would happen. A lot of people that I know actually voted for that reason. Also, the other irony was that millions of people, millions of Europeans, people from Germany, France, Spain, Portugal, they are all living in UK, working in London, and they've been living in UK for 15, 20 years, 30 years. Some of them for all their life practically, ever since the time that they were born, they've been living in UK. But they are citizens of Spain, France, and they did not get to vote because they are not UK citizens and they're not allowed to vote. But on the contrary, people who had come from India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, even for a very short duration, even if they had come to UK for like 3 months, 6 months, just for a project, for sure that they're going to go back. Even within that 3-6 months, they got to vote on whether Britain should leave European Union or not, which they had no clue what they were voting for. And the reason they were allowed to vote was because they are Commonwealth citizens. So the rule says that if you're a Commonwealth citizen, even if you're here for a very short duration, you are allowed to vote. And millions of these people who were in UK for a very short time, they all voted, and most of them actually voted leave because they thought fundamentally it will help them get more visas, more work visas. And fundamentally everyone thought that it would enable more Indians to come and work in UK if less Europeans are going to work, which is flawed, which will come to it at a later stage. is the campaigning, because everyone took it for granted that Brexit is not going to happen. The Leave campaign was campaigning ferociously. In fact, they had even hired thousands of these buses where it was all fully painted with the 350 million pounds, the 19 billion pounds, which could be used in NHS, and they were ferociously campaigning. In fact, in the place that I live, every 10 feet there was a Leave campaign banner and a poster, which basically was campaigning that we should leave and why we should leave, and giving thousands of arguments. I had never seen a Remain poster in any place that I live in, or even this in the entire county that I live in. I didn't even see a single poster for Remain. So even though both the Remain and Leave campaign were given equal funds to campaign, the Remain campaign actually took it very carelessly, and they hardly ever campaigned. 2016, the vote result came, and in 2017, a year later, Britain invoked Article 50, which basically is the triggering point. It's like a notice that you give to your company saying that I'm going to quit. I'll serve the 3-month notice period. So it gives them a 2-year notice period, which again ended months back, and we've been given like 3 extensions so far. The last extension is now running till the 31st of January. So the main reason why the extensions were required and why Britain wasn't able to leave was because the deal between European Union and UK wasn't agreed as to what are the terms and conditions of the exit. Because today, there are so many things that are taken for granted, like immigration, trade, customs, and all of these things. So they need to basically establish a border control. They need to establish customs control. They need to establish immigration policies. So all of these need to be put down in paper and need to be agreed. This is basically called the Brexit deal. Now, if Britain leaves without this deal being ratified or agreed by the government or by European Union, that's what is a no deal scenario. Today is that if a European Union citizen from any of these countries goes to another country, all they need to do is just wave their passport and they can basically just go. There is no stamping, there is no visa required, there is no verification, there is no validity. Basically, if he holds any identity card of the European Union countries, he can easily walk through the immigration. There is no customs check or immigration check that happens. Now, with the exit from European Union, there needs to be an immigration check. He needs to have an appropriate entry permission to come into UK, and reciprocally, they also need, the UK citizens also need to have a visa or a process that needs to be agreed to for them to be able to go, first of all, visit the other countries, and also from a work perspective, they need to agree on what are the terms and conditions that they are able to go and work in Europe, and same way the European citizens are able to come and work in UK. One of the most controversial points in this agreement, which you would have heard the term before, is backstop. So before we look at backstop, look at the geography of United Kingdom. So United Kingdom is made up of 4 countries or 4 regions. So England, Wales and Scotland is made up of 1 island, and then Ireland and Northern Ireland share the same island, and Northern Ireland is part of UK and Ireland is not part of UK. So today Ireland belongs to European Union and Northern Ireland also belongs to European Union, but it's part of Britain or part of UK. Now, if UK alone decides to move out of European Union, Northern Ireland will be out of European Union, which means there needs to be a border control between Northern Ireland and Ireland. But this is basically, miles and miles of roads that are just across the street from these 2 places. So it's like, it's like India, like 2 states, not even 2 states within the same state, how you can go from one city to another city. And there's no border checks or anything. Now, if you have to implement a border control, you have to basically build some sort of a boundary between miles and miles of roads where, you could be neighbors with the next street, but suddenly the next street becomes a different country or it is outside the European Union. And you need to have an immigration to go and visit your neighbor who's in the next street. Or maybe your mother who's living in the next street and she is living in a different country and now you're living in a different country. So backstop was an agreement where they were trying to agree that, okay, for Northern Ireland alone, let us not complicate things by implementing a border control by a customs policy. So let Northern Ireland continue to remain within the European Union regulations in terms of immigration and customs checks. But politically, many of the parties were opposed to this ideology. How can you let one region alone be part of European Union? This is biased. So this was basically the biggest controversy, whether backstop should be allowed or not allowed. Preparing for Brexit by asking the citizens of these European countries who are living in UK, working in UK, to apply for settlement, to apply for a Remain status. So they had to actually apply and get a Remain status, so that would allow them to continue working, continue living in UK. If they didn't, and if they have not got a status, then they will probably have to leave or basically again reapply after the Brexit happens. Winning the election, a no-deal Brexit looks more and more unlikely. But what would have happened if a no-deal Brexit has happened is that there is a trade route between UK and Europe, and every day thousands and thousands of lorries with commodities and goods come from France into UK and from UK into France. If we had to implement a no-deal Brexit, then there's no customs checks or border agreements in place, which means that every lorry and every transport vehicle needs to be stopped and checked, and there needs to be a customs validation, there needs to be an immigration validation, which would have created a huge queue, a backlog of miles and miles between the borders, and all the commodities where it would have taken less than 2 minutes for a lorry to cross, it will now take like days for one lorry to cross because of the backlog that it would have created. So that was a no-deal scenario that everyone was trying to prevent, and it's looking more unlikely because the Conservatives have won. Now, this is again interesting. A lot of people were asking me in my election video, why did the Conservatives win, when clearly Liberal Democrats were the only big party who were backing cancellation of the Brexit. Do people actually want Brexit? No. Of the result, many of the Conservative leaders accepted the fact that this is more of an anti-Labour vote that they've got because no one wanted Jeremy Corbyn to win. So the fear of Labour coming into power was higher than the factor that whether we would go for a Brexit or not. So the option was either you vote for Lib Dems or a different party, and Labour would come to power, or for sure that Conservative is going to get most of the seats. Vote for Conservatives and bring them to power so that Labour, by any chance, they don't come to power at all. So it was more of an anti-Labour, anti-Jeremy Corbyn vote that Conservatives got, and which something that Conservative leaders actually agreed on national television on the day of the election results when it came in. And some of the Indians who've been commenting on the channel, they've been saying that it's good that Boris Johnson comes into power because he's going to bring back the point system, he's going to bring back policies that help more people to come from India. But interesting point to note is it was under the Conservative government when Theresa May was the Home Secretary, when she removed the Tier 1 process, when she removed the Tier 2 settlement option where Tier 2 people were able to settle in UK, and she removed those options. Basically, all of the things that had been removed were done in the Conservative governments when Theresa May was the Home Secretary and when Conservatives were in power. Now, hoping for all of that to be brought back because of voting Conservative back in power is a bit ironic. I actually, when in the election explanation, I had actually said that I'm going to back Liberal Democrats. In reality, personally, I'm benefiting more because of Conservatives coming into power, because Boris Johnson is the only person who said that he's going to reduce he's going to keep the taxes as it is, but he's also going to reduce the contribution to national insurance by increasing the limit that you pay, and which means that eventually it's going to be like £500 more that I'm going to earn per year. So actually, financially, Conservatives coming back into power is helping me. But I really didn't want them to come into power because I was against Brexit for all the reasons I've just mentioned. Final story to end the video is how Boris Johnson became the Conservative leader. So till about 2016, just few weeks in fact before the Brexit vote actually happened, Boris Johnson did not support Brexit. He was remaining neutral. In fact, he was backing up David Cameron, who was the biggest Conservative leader thus far. there were no strong leaders on the Brexit side. So there was a person called Michael Gove. He was probably only the only prominent figure who was supporting Brexit, and there was no other conservative leader who was supporting Brexit. So if a strong conservative leader started supporting Brexit, he will be considered the leader of the conservatives if Brexit happens, and he will have a brighter chance to become a prime minister. So most of the newspapers, in fact, published this analysis saying that that is the only reason why Boris Johnson actually decided to support Brexit. He did not have an ideology to support Brexit. It's just because there was an option for him to become prime minister. He backstabbed his friend David Cameron, and he became a supporter of Brexit few weeks before the Brexit vote actually happened. This was useful because a lot of people had been asking me to make this content in English, so I tried my level best to keep the content similar to the one that I did in Tamil, but I also added a few bits of the current scenario of the election results and so on. Thank you for watching, and continue watching.